Thank you for the honor of being down here with you. I was really excited when I heard about this conference, because a lot of the kind of work we're doing up in our community, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but it's really important that our Indigenous communities are really grappling with these issues and talking about them and talking about real stuff, in our communities. And so I was really took a lot of inspiration from this movement on seed sovereignty and food sovereignty that's down here in New Mexico, and same issues we're talking about in our community. And I was down here, I think it was the end of February, where I was down here talking about these issues, and then I had a convening over at Sandia, and then these guys just kick butt, and they just start getting this work done, and I'm just really, really thankful for your work down here. So I want to thank you for the good work on behalf of the seeds and the food down here, and thank everyone for coming today. And it's such a small world, as I was in the bathroom, I was gussing up, and anyway, there's this young woman, she said, "I saw you last Friday on 5th Avenue in New York." That was so funny, huh? And then there's that guy in the back, and that guy in the back, I met him at a hotel in Gallup, huh? He was with a bunch of youth, and they were like, "Hey," As I reflected on what to talk with you about, I was here for this afternoon, and I was listening, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're thinking about in our area, but I wanted to start foundationally with some of our teachings, which I know resonate very much with the teachings that are in these other communities, and I don't want to be redundant, because the people here are people who know a lot of these things, and that's not my intention. But part of what my process is, I'm on my way to be a grandma this week. I'm so excited. But it's that process. You go through life, and we're human. That's not a really brilliant statement, but let's just say we're human. And so we just, we try to do the best we can. We botch up. We just do the best we can. Pray hard, work hard. That's always kind of my strategy. Or like what I believe, pray hard, work hard, And although my children get tired of hearing that some days, pray hard and work hard. But, as you go through, I think that, that the jackhammer of America is such a jackhammer on your psyche, on your spirit, on your land, on everything that resonates with you. That I think that a lot of the process that, I go through is I always am trying to figure out how to be a better human. How it is that I find that place, which, I think we've got pretty much, but how we keep that, how we strengthen that and nurture, what is supposed to be, who we are, and how our humanity, is related to this, our relations to others that have wings or fins or two legs, or roots. How our humanity is intimately related to that. And in this day and age, I think that even in Indigenous communities, we are struggling with that. I live on the White Earth Reservation. I think that some of you know this, which is up in northwestern Minnesota. And, we have a lot of the same struggles a lot of our Indigenous communities face because of this jackhammer that's been on us for 100 years or so, and how you kind of, can get rid of the din of that and be real. Is really this struggle that I find that, it is a daily struggle. Is to not just get lost, or to not, not get stupid, or not get so self-medicated that you forget who you are and what we're about, and to keep your children in that same place and on that same path. So as I say that, what I wanted to talk about to start with in this process of ensuring my own humanity, which is, I think, maybe, other people are, I think that is part of what we talk about. What I know, and I think that is that part of my humanity is this covenant I have with the Creator. That is not, it's an individual responsibility, but it's a collective covenant that we have in our societies and in our communities, which is like how it is we respect and acknowledge who we are in this big picture. And so in that covenant, there are teachings, and, a lot of these come from John Mohawk's territory as well as ours, but we have this teaching. Oren says it the best, Oren Lyons, when he says that the Creator's law is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nations, states, or municipalities. And one would do well to live in accordance with the Creator's law. And that is to say, in our language, Gishita Bwewin, the great law, that is that law. And we as humans, we're just such a small figment, such a small slip in that. So how is it that we figure out how it is we live in accordance with that? In our territory, we have this teaching of Minopamata, which is this teaching of this good life. And it is, this way that we strive to live that doesn't have anything to do with America, as it turns out. It doesn't have anything to do with a lot of these other things. It has to do with like how we work it out. That we, just like John was saying before, that our spiritual practice is not something that happens only at our drum ceremonies or our Medewan. It's how you live your life. How it is that you go into your field, or you go out with your rice, or you talk to your relatives, or you have your prayers, or you just what it is you do. And some of it is mundane. It is not, all, fancy stuff. But it is just how you, how you do those things in the right way. And in our teachings, we have these teachings that say, to be involved in this Minopamata Siwan, we have these teachings that recognize our relatives, Nindawe Maganatuk, that we are related to them, that some have fins and some have wings and some have roots and some have paws. But we're really, we're the last ones to have arrived. And we are dependent on them, not they on us. That's the reality. They do just fine without us. By and large, most would be better off. Since we're consuming a lion's share of the biosphere. And basically making them paupers in their own ecosystems, whether a salmon in the river or a wolf in Yellowstone or in northern Minnesota or a bear or a buffalo. They don't need us, that's for sure. But we need them. And they have a teaching that, acknowledges, and I'm part of working on this now, this here moon it acknowledges the cyclical relationship of all things. That all things are cyclical, the moons, the tides, our bodies themselves. And in our seasons, we just finished with the moon that is called Manomenike Gizes, the wild rice making moon. That's what we call it. And then we're just entering into Gashkabno Gizes, the freezing up moon. We have a moon, my favorite moon, personally my favorite moon, I like the way it sounds, is Anabana Gizes. Anabana Gizes. Isn't that a great word? Anabana Gizes, which means when the snow is hard crusted. It's for March. When it freezes and thaws, you know what I mean? And so that crust, it's when you don't want to do a face plant. But that's that moon. And what does that say? When we remember what those moons are in our own teachings, we acknowledge this cyclical world within which we live, And I think about that a lot because we live in a society which is, in our own indigenous people, we're talking about, a Julius Caesar calendar for crying out loud. You got all these Romans, they didn't do too well. They got a lot of stuff named after them, but they weren't really the picture of sustainability, were they? But even us in this day and age, we talk about this calendar that has no relevance to these teachings and to who we are and where we are, and I think that, I'm part of this interest in recovering that traditional one, because it means something. It means something. And I know it's different. You guys don't have the wild rice making moon down here, but you got your own moons that have this significance, And then we have this teaching that's, you take only what you need and you leave the rest. And that's this covenant where you always give your thanksgiving and you dance for your food and you feast your food and you pray and, and you leave, like that lady was talking about, picking the mullein leaves and you leave them. You just take some, But those are all the teachings of sustainability. And I know that you know this. I'm not trying to, I'm reaffirming our teachings, but I think that more than that, I think that one of the things that we have to acknowledge and struggle with is that the process of colonization transforms our thinking. Because colonization is a process which transforms everything about you. And we have all been through it, no matter who we are. We are colonized peoples. I'm interested in the decolonization process, but the reality is you got to dig deep in it. Because colonization is not just about military. It's not just about economics. It's not just about language. It's about the paradigm of science. It's about religion. It's about, it's about food. And how all of this got colonized. And that is what we are dealing with. And we have to acknowledge that that is what happened. And I laugh, Steve Newcomb is who first said it, and I think you all, maybe you've heard this before, but he was swinging and laugh when I heard this. He said, the word colonization, it has a root. And the root is the word colon. Which is true because colonization is, it's the same thing. It basically means to digest. And that's what it is. It's the process of one culture digesting another culture. In all those ways. And it is related in those words, and it is right. It is that process, And so I think that kind of acknowledging that, because we end up in a situation where in our own indigenous communities, we do stuff that emulates the process of colonization, and we do it even better, than some of the colonizers. I mean, get real. We see it in our own communities. We see it, so we adopt the paradigm of, the pervasive thinking and the teachings that believe in this paradigm of science, or that believe in this paradigm that somehow, the accoutrements of the society are that to which we should aspire. We adopt a paradigm and we become consumed in the paradigm. And, I'm someone who's been all the way through American education, like probably a lot of you here, maybe not. But, the thing is that is this, it so begins to permeate you that you begin to think and you have to deconstruct even that. So we end up where we are today, where, we live in a society which, arguably we've combusted ourselves to the edge of oblivion. We've, consumed more oil. I think like 70 years we've consumed pretty much all the known oil reserves that were easy to get at. The rest of them are like the crack at the bottom of the sea in China, or I don't know what heck they are. Everything that could be consumed as fast as it could be consumed, we've consumed it. We've watched the destruction of, ecosystem after ecosystem. We have struggled against it as Indigenous people, but at the same time, in some cases, we have actually been complicit. I think to pretend that we have not been, as colonized peoples, complicit in some of it, I think is a mistake. To say, because I see it in my own reservation, I got in an argument about, we fixed it, The discussion was about sturgeon. Do you know what sturgeon are? The fish sturgeon. Those great big guys, right? Neme-wug. And in our reservation, we have these sturgeon, and they're all wiped out by around 1923. And that was not us, that was pretty much dams and greedy fishing people, and just bad things that happen. They wipe them out, And then so the last one was killed around 1923, and then and what happened is that our sturgeon are part of our spiritual stories. Our Tesuque, there's a part of some of our most significant teachings, because they're kind of like the buffalo of the Ojibwe. They're of such great significance spiritually in terms of their role in the water, right? I mean, the things, they're immense. They live 150 years. They've been around since the dinosaurs. So I don't know if you know how cool sturgeon are, right? They're like the great fish, right? And so what happens is in my community about 9 years ago, I have to think, because my kids were about this tall, that long. Anyway, I don't know, I just always loved them sturgeon, And so I hear that there's these Indians up in Canada that have the sturgeon. And we decide to go up there and see these Indians, and we're just north of us, these Ojibways, on the other side of the border, which is largely irrelevant, So we go across the border and we see these sturgeon, and they have a sturgeon hatchery. It's the only sturgeon hatchery in Canada, and only native sturgeon hatchery. I think, at the time it was the only sturgeon hatchery in North America. And they're taking wild fish out of from our community and from our area, because I know that they're there, and I know this guy knows a lot about them. And he has a lot of material, but he says, the funny thing is, Winona, the tribe was over here a couple of days ago and asked the same questions. And so, since then, my tribe has put in about 25,000 sturgeon a year in our lakes, And Randy Norman is known as as the Surgeon General of White Earth now. He gives his presentations at all those Indian Fish and Wildlife, National Wildlife Friends, about his sturgeon recovery program, And my family has been involved in that. Every year we go to the sturgeon release ceremony. We pray and we sing for them sturgeon. And this year, about 25 elders are coming down from that reserve to join us for the release ceremony. And we're going to have a big feast with them, and we're going to have all sturgeon songs, and we're doing that on Tuesday. So I'm so excited. I'm so excited about it. But I'm telling you that story because that is like this question of how you get involved in this paradigm. And Randy, bless his soul, at that time was kind of involved in that paradigm of what we're supposed to be thinking as Indigenous natural resource managers. We're supposed to be thinking of fish as natural resources. Well, you know what I'm saying. And that, we should look at what is economically viable and what the cash flow projection is. And that is what I'm saying is part of what we have to think of, is that there is a spiritual element. I mean, there are a lot of elements that are not on the paper. And the recovery of humanity and the recovery of communities is about all of that. It is not about, this, necessarily just this bottom line, So, but we are faced as Indigenous communities with the pervasiveness of this paradigm, and we are faced with a new morph of the paradigm each year, So my new theory, this is my new theory, which you guys probably discard here by tomorrow. My new theory is that basically technology means you never have to say you're sorry. My thinking on this is this, is that, the United States is not particularly good at saying it's sorry. I don't know if anybody has noticed this. Like about a 3-year-old and its behavior patterns internationally, nationally, apologies on reparations, apologies to, just doesn't apologize as a country, But, and in terms of the way we relate to the natural world, we also don't apologize. As America, it doesn't apologize. It just keeps going on with one bad decision after another. So a perfect example is that the Green Revolution. That one didn't really pan out, as it turns out. In the Green Revolution, you grow some, things, you have a decline in crop fertility, you create, 1,500 dead zones around the world with all the runoff of all the chemicals you just put on. You use immense amounts of fossil fuel-based fertilizers and fossil fuels to create an amount of food that, in the meantime, more people are starving in the world, right? So we had the Green Revolution that was supposed to help us, right? So what was the answer to the Green Revolution? Oh, that would be genetic engineering, right? Because genetic engineering doesn't require the same amount of chemicals. So they say, we've done that, and so now we have Roundup Ready, so you don't have to do all of those, additions of the, fossil fuel-based fertilizers or the chemicals or, whatever it is. And in case after case, they're talking about that as the new answer, and I'm sure that Vandana will talk about it. I heard one of the most amazing, and you get a case like oil spills. So what was the proposal for oil spills? Instead of saying, maybe we shouldn't ship some of this stuff, or, maybe we shouldn't put in those tankers that are, single-hulled or whatever, what was that proposal? I mean, the proposals, among other proposals, by and large, there's this proposal, remember this, to create genetically engineered bacteria to eat the oil spills? There you go. You don't have to say you're sorry. You just make some new technological fix that'll, get you out of your mind. The last absurd thing was about 2 weeks ago, I heard, not the last, but I only, have a limited amount of knowledge of how bad and how, the paradigm heads out there, but there's this discussion on CO2 emissions. And basically, we've got greenhouse gases, global climate destabilization is pounding down on us. It's just going to get exponentially worse unless we cut our carbon. Unless we cut the amount of CO2 we emit into the environment from, a good portion of the fossil fuels plants down here in the Southwest. And all these coal-fired power plants. Between Crow and Navajo got 1/9 of the world's coal reserves. 1/9 the world's coal reserves between Crow and Navajo. It's a hell of a lot of coal. Scary. Be truthful about it. So what is the new answer is that instead of cutting our emissions, the utilities are talking about clean coal, right? And then the latest thing I heard, which some of you probably read, is that they have this new technology that they just discovered. What they want to do is they want to take the CO2 emissions, the gases, and liquefy them. Did anybody see this article? liquefy the gases, and then inject them into like offshore in the oceans, at the bottom of the ocean. There you go. You know, billions and billions of dollars worth of expenditures. Rather than just saying we're sorry, you see what I'm saying? You know, we botched it up. We're going to cut our CO2 emissions. What they are saying is that we have another technological fix. And this fix is that we're going to just, you know, keep on doing this stuff, but now we're going to just spend hundreds of billions of dollars injecting it, you know, under the ocean. Right? And what I think we have to rankle against, you know, as Indigenous people, is that technology is the fix. It is the wellspring of our teachings, you know, that is the answer. It is not that there's going to be some new kind of a fix. You know, I'm not a complete, I want to say, you know, if you say a Luddite, whatever, but, you know, it is not that I do not believe in technology. But to perceive that we can fix our way out of it is wrong. You know, without changing our practices, even in our own communities. And so we find ourselves, you know, where we are now, in a society where we have created this paradigm, and in the course of that paradigm, we have, you know, observed that America has run out of things to colonize. So what is left is, you know, the genetic matter of the world. That is what biocolonialism is. Having run out of continents or, you know, oceans or space, although, you know, I'm sure there's something those guys could all do out there. Waste billions of more dollars. You know, so now what they go back to is the genetic matter of the world. And the process of biocolonialism, which is what we're dealing with now as Indigenous people. The mining of the world's genetic resources for private profit, you know, and for ownership and for patenting. And so it is that we end up where we, even as Indigenous people, have, you know, become colonized in this process. So in most of our communities, you know, I had some good food here today. But in our Indigenous communities, we got to work on our food. You know, because in my own community, you know, we got a lot of good stuff to eat, but it turns out that we actually shop off reservation and buy bad stuff and bring it in. And in that process, we've colonized our own taste buds. You know, so we become accustomed to the levels of sugar, the levels of salt, or the levels of whatever it is that got in them that we've become addicted to. And in that process, we've compromised everything that we have. So I was reading some, you know, other study, but, you know, they're saying that even the nutritional value of most of the food on the shelf or in the store is diminished so significantly. They're saying that up to a 60% reduction in, like, the iron and magnesium and calcium in meat, industrial meat. 60% reduction in the value of it, nutritional value. You know, so meat isn't even meat anymore. You know, all those vegetables, all those beans. It is, in the end, you know, and we get sick from it all, which is where our diabetes comes from, but in the end, the paradigm is not just an idea. It is what we are living. You know, what we are eating and what is getting us in our communities. So, I'm interested in this process of decolonizing. And that is what we're working on White Earth. You know, I have the privilege of, I basically do two things. I work on my own reservation. I direct a nonprofit, the White Earth Land Recovery Project, which is a pretty big reservation-based nonprofit. And then I have the privilege of working for a national Native foundation called Honor the Earth. And I get to work with a lot of Indigenous communities nationally. And at White Earth, it was funny because I had a meeting. My organization's really grown. And I'll talk a little bit about it, but I had a meeting here about 2 months ago with some of my staff, and I'm trying to get us all on the same page. You know, and it's not all Ojibways on my staff. I got an Aleut, and I got one Cherokee, and then I got one, I can't remember. I had a couple Navajos on my staff this summer. Every community should have at least one Navajo. That's my theory. You know, every medium-sized community. Anyway, and then I have, you know, some, you know, this young woman, this woman is Norwegian, And, Norwegian kind of came from a redneck community, and she's really grappling with working with us. I got a few of those. But, I believe that everybody should have a chance to decolonize. I don't know if I have the patience to work with them on the decolonization process. I'm not clear on that yet. I raised five teenagers, and I often tell my staff that I've squandered all my patience already at home. So there won't be any more patients allocated out today. I don't know if parents have this same thing going on. But sometimes it's like, oh. But, so they're talking, and it turns out we're not all on the same political page on a decolonization process. Even my own organization, this is something we're working on. And so, finally I said to them, I said, you know what, I'm not messing around here. I'm not doing this because I want to create a service-based organization that distributes commodities or that helps people with their addictions. I said, I want to be about how we liberate ourselves, as Indigenous people, how we recover who we are and, and are able to envision what our future is like and to put that process in our own hearts and our, prayers and our hands and make it, and not be carrying so much of our own oppression that we can't figure out where we're going, which put a couple of my staff off their chairs, but then the rest of them got it. So I say that because it is internal in your own communities and in your own organizations, And I know that I'm sure a lot of you have already worked through that down here, but, we're working on it wider, So, my father, a long time ago, he used to have this saying which, when I was listening to this afternoon session, reminded me a lot of my father. My father said, he basically said, I don't want to hear your philosophy if it doesn't grow corn. It's just an interesting, so maybe I can put it in a positive thing. I'm hoping your philosophy grows corn, or I don't know how that works. Because I don't know if that was proper English how my dad said it, but that's how I remembered it. And I think that is a little what we were talking about here. It's like, I'm interested in this, what the relevance of my spiritual teachings is to this. And what I am sure of is that the teachings that are coming from our spiritual practice are those which do teach us how to relate to our relatives that are core. And that is important, to not separate those teachings from our lives in this millennium. Because in our own colonization process, to some extent, I think as Indigenous people, what you hear is that, I hear it in my community. I hear people say, well, those are our teachings, and then they go and they do whatever they do. Or they say, they'll say, well, that's what they said, but we have to do this. And I'm saying that and I'm being honest, because there is this, it's not even a schizophrenia. We have more personalities than that, So how we heal and recognize that those teachings are absolutely relevant to sustainability is, I think, part of what we have to look at, because we, in our colonization process, often even discard them and put them as things that we refer to as our identity, or as, but not necessarily as that which informs that which we do today on a day-to-day basis. So let me talk about our work on White Earth a little bit. And, a lot of you probably heard this story, but, I stood on my head and put some condominiums up there. I was like, joke. This is between a highway and a railroad in a town of 300. I was going to put a condominium up. You guys would think we're dumb. Right, so I fight them all the way, And then finally we get to the place and we're good. But anyway, bought this school and we put a food processing facility in there now. Our offices, and we're going to run an Indian radio station out of it. Oh, that's if we can beat the Christian right to that frequency, but I'm hoping. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about? When these frequencies open up and right wings buying them all up, but shh, the tongue. We're firing. We got it. We're on the move. Like a couple of organizations, a women's organization and language immersion projects now office in there too. That's good. It's like a community center. It's just getting going, you know. That's what we do. It's kind of a big leap for us, you know, to do this. But, you know, my organization, White Earth Land Recovery Project, was founded on the question of kind of like, what is this Jimeno Bamado Ziwan, or how is it that we make this good life? You know, who should be in charge of our community? Instead of being victims, you know, be honest. Instead of having someone tell us, you know, what to do and treat us like second-class citizens and, you know, keep us in this situation of a society which is totally linear, instead of having cyclical thinking as linear, where everything is a production system where you create products and waste. In your production system or in your humans. But we've got more people in prison than anybody in the world, right? That's waste. Total waste. Same thing, linear systems. So we said we want to do this, and we work on land issues, and then, you know, one of the main things in our community is how we end up in this food sovereignty movement is our wild rice. Turns out my reservation has 3 things in great abundance. Smart people, the majority of whom don't live there, actually. You know, we have this problem where the majority of our tribal members, 3/4 of them, don't live on White Earth. They had Indian health services and programs in a lot of other major cities. I'm interested actually in this repatriation program. I'd like them to come home. You know? So I was giving a talk at the University of Minnesota, and there's all these Indian college students from White Earth down there, and I said, oh, you guys can come home now. And they're looking at me, I'm talking about how they need to come home and work for our organization and for our tribe, and they look at me and I said, well, it's okay. We set up a wireless internet cafe. You can get fresh roasted coffee and cappuccino. You can come home. You know, because that's what they got accustomed to in that whole process, you know. But actually, I like good coffee too, you know. That's why I had to roast it ourselves. That's the story of our lives up there. Nobody else do it damn for us, so we set up a coffee roaster. It's like, good enough. We'll do it. Right there, trade and organic. We have 3 things in great abundance. 1 is smart people. 2 is wild rice. 47 lakes. Good portion of them have rice. And 3 is a lot of wind. Not just hot air for me, but wind. So, you know, that is actually, you know, what we've been working on. And on the rice, you know, I didn't really ask to get involved in this big set of issues, but we started in the 80s on the rice issue. And Margaret Smith, my 89-year-old cousin, and I, you know, our family's riced. My dad actually met my mom selling wild rice. You know, all our family's riced, and that's how they made their money in the fall, selling their rice, and they eat it. And then they sell the remainder to make, you know, put clothes on their kids' back and get tires and get wood, or, you know, get their chainsaw fixed, you know, because we're not a wealthy reservation. You know, we're actually, I think, the poorest reservation in the state. But that's economically. It has nothing to do with quality of life, you know. And so what happened to us is that the advent of the paddy rice industry, which was, you know, created, these anthropologists came up and saw us ricing, and they pretty much did this thing too. They were like, oh, you know, those Indian people, they have so princely a grain. The question that in the anthropological journals, how could so princely a grain be given to so savage a people? You know, interesting value judgment in there somehow, you know. And then they go on to report, you know, and the idea was that you didn't have to plant it. It grows on the lakes naturally. It's totally amazing. Talk about a gift from the Creator. You know, that's a gift to us. I'll tell you what, I had a Thai rice farmer up on the reservation this last week, you know, because we're in this big battle now. And so these rice farmers are coming to visit us, and a Thai rice farmer, I met him and I met these other ones before, and they were almost in tears because they spend their whole lives cultivating their rice paddies, you know, trying to figure out how to get a ton of rice to feed their family. And they got to grow it, they got to care for it, and they got to harvest it. And they kept saying, you don't plant it. He said, no, we just take care of our lakes and it grows on the lake by itself. And they're just like in tears. You don't plant it, they kept saying to me. I was like, no. This Thai guy comes up and, we took him out there and he's just like weeping when he saw our rice. He just could not believe it, But those anthropologists couldn't either, and they're mad about it, Because we harvest the rice and then we have big feast, We had a big Thanksgiving, big dance. Just like with those beans, we dance on our rice hulls after we parch them to get the chaff off. Same thing, pretty much, So that's what they're doing, and the anthropologists watch them and say, it's an early Christmas for the Ojibwe and Ojibwe Mardi Gras. They're dancing too much. Just really uptight, those anthropologists, basically. Didn't want anyone to be dancing. Wanted them to be working hard, getting stressed out. And so they spent about 4 years figuring out how to screw up our rice, and they did. Figured out how to grow it in diked rice paddies that they could use chemicals and fertilizers and harvest it with a combine. Call it progress. Industrialized rice production, which is the same thing as industrialized food production across the board. What happens to your cornfield, how, what is food that is a part of your culture becomes an industrialized thing that has no nutritional value. And so it totally pounded our community because you can't compete with the guy with the combine. Uncle Ben's gets to call it wild rice. We don't think they should be able to call it wild rice. We think that's tame rice. Grown in one diked rice paddy in California, no less now. 75% of all wild rice comes from California. We just think that's wrong, and so they started battling it in the 80s. And first we start battling, and Margaret Smith and I go out there to the lake, and these white rice buyers are on the lake shore, and they're trying to pay Indians instead of $1 a pound for green rice that you knock. At Lakeside, they're trying to pay us 50 cents a pound. Drive the price down. And, we're just mad. And Margaret and I got some money from the Catholics. This is where we got our first chunk of money from the Catholic Church Campaign for Human Development. And she's a really good bluffer, because they didn't know how much money we had. And so we went out there to the lake shore with our, money stuffed in Margaret's girdle, probably, for all I know, Out there just, digging money out, And we're buying rice. And we only had $3,000-4,000 worth. No, maybe we had $5,000. But the thing was, is we paid $1 a pound, so they had to pay $1 a pound. See what I'm saying? And so that's what we started. Because in the 80s, we were driving the price up, and we kept driving the price up and keeping the price just like, it's a fair trade issue, right? You should get paid for your labor, And then a couple guys from our reservation sued Anheuser-Busch, who had this Onamia wild rice with 2 Indians in a canoe on it, which came from a diked rice paddy in California. We sued him in Minnesota court, and those guys did. And then we ended up with this decision, and ended up with a law in Minnesota which requires wild rice to be labeled. And it has to be labeled, when it says cultivated, it has to be labeled in letters 50% the size of what's wild rice on the label. And the problem is that there's a big loophole, which is California is exempt from the law. So 75% of our wild rice that is sold, including down here at Whole Foods and whoever, that is California wild rice. And I figure if you buy it at Whole Foods, you should be buying something that some Indians knocked. I'm actually haggling with Whole Foods right now, which is the story of my life. But, so we were trying to do some business with them, and they're interested in our rice, but I go in to talk to them, and they want us to lower our price. And I said, all our other wholesalers, including the Smithsonian, what I'm saying is everybody is buying it at this price. Why do you want it for less? And they're like, because we can't make our profit, essentially. And I'm like, you guys should tell the story and sell it. You guys have the marketing power to tell the story and to sell the rice. That's where we are. We're still in that same battle, but we've been on that battle, and we're selling our rice. We're doing better. We sell it ourselves. I did actually bring some rice, but it's native harvest. But then, it's what we're called, native harvest. But then we came in this bigger battle, which was this issue that we discovered in the year 2000, which was the issue of patenting and genetic engineering, which is the issue that every indigenous community is going to face. And that issue was this question of California company had 2 patents on wild rice, and We didn't think they should be able to patent it, because we think the word wild rice shouldn't be associated with the word patent. You know? And then the second issue was this issue of genetic engineering. You know, we feel like wild should mean something, you know, which would not be genetically engineered. And so we've been in this battle since around 2000. We had to have these meetings in our community, and the same discussions that I'm sure some of you are having. You know, with our traditional people, we have a lot of our drum ceremony people, our religious leaders. We call them together, we go visit them, and we said, look, what you think about these things? And you know, what I noticed is that, you know, I mean, what they all said was the same thing. It's like, you know, basically, who gave them the right to do that? You know, the issue of genetic engineering is a deeply spiritual issue for Indigenous people. You know, it's not like an abstract paradigm of science question. It has to do with who gave anybody the right to transform that fundamental aspect of our spiritual relationship to something that was given to us by the Creator. You know? And the same thing with patenting. Who gave them the right to own life forms? You know, and the thing is that in my own community, and I know this is probably true in some other Indigenous communities, the idea of what is genetic engineering was pretty damn complex to explain. And you know what? The tragedy, which I think a lot of you know, is that actually most legislators don't even know what it is. I had arguments with the Minnesota legislature for 3 years now, and some of those guys there thought that genetically engineered crops were sterile, so they couldn't contaminate. You know, I'm like, you guys know, you know? And then they do this thing which I'm sure a lot of people are accustomed to, like, as a Native person and as a woman, they patronize you. You know, so you go there and you're talking to them. You know, I'm talking to this guy, and he's like, you know, basically says, well, if you had a little more understanding, and that's this whole argument on genetic engineering, you wouldn't be afraid of it if you understood it a little better. You know, which of course makes me kind of want to flip them off, but I'm sorry, I probably should never said that, maybe. Like, come on. I was like, you know, I do have a couple degrees. I got it down. I do know, I do know what I'm talking about, you know, but what I realized is that they didn't know. And so they were trying to use this, pull out their old, sorry stuff. Like, you guys don't know because we know more. You know, which is what that's about. They just don't know. And they want to hide behind their own legislative, you know, titles. Senator. You know, in this case, Senator Skoy in Minnesota. Telling me flat out, you know, and I'm like, read the literature. You know. But it is true. This battle, part of it is that. And then, of course, the second part of the battle is, of course, that a good portion of our state colleges and universities are underwritten by Monsanto and DuPont in the biotech industry, and you cannot decouple that from this discussion. You know, I find it so interesting when the University of Minnesota, which is who's been doing the DNA work on wild rice, the University of Minnesota wants the right to genetically engineer wild rice. Says they aren't doing it, but they want the right to, you know, according to, you know, clothed in the phrase of academic freedom. You know, but then you got to wonder if their academic freedom is underwritten by Monsanto. You know, if that has any bearing on their analysis of what freedom is. You know, if I had a corporate logo right here across the bottom of my department, you know, which is what is going on. You know, which is back to the same reality, which is always the same reality, is that we don't fund education, we fund the military. And so big corporations like those guys, the military and the biotech, have taken over these universities. It is not opposing all genetic engineering. It is only opposing the genetic engineering of wild rice. Some people are mad at us that we don't want to talk about all genetic engineering issues. Our community has said we will talk about genetic engineering of wild rice, and we believe that we have a shot at winning on that. Because, first of all, it's the only grain indigenous to North America. 2, you got 10,000 lakes, and we think that there's an arguable case that says you don't want 10,000 genetically engineered lakes. You know, it's also the state grain of Minnesota. So I'm spending a great deal of time. I actually hired this guy. I call him he's very good-natured about it. He's going over to Italy with us. I think, what does he say? He says to me, Winona, isn't my job title white people outreach worker? That's to say, I hired this guy who's like really, really straight, preppy-looking guy, right? That talks to, like, Ducks Unlimited. You know what I'm saying? The stores, the business guys, you know. He just looks really straight. It's like just too damn much work sometimes to try to get those guys to overcome all their racism, deconstruct all their preconceptions, you know. And so what you need is, you know, it's this question of how you deconstruct racism or struggle with racism. And sometimes, you know, you need someone who just looks like them to help. You know, which is what we're doing. And he's really doing well. He's got all these mayors signing on now, and city councils, Republican city councils are signing on to oppose genetic engineering of wild rice. I've been to the legislature twice battling, and it's tough. But it also requires building a movement. I mean, a lot of you know this. You got to build a movement that is broad. And you got to be smart because they're going to end run you. So the first time at the legislature, you know, at the same time, same 4 people testified both times. Me and 3 white guy professors. Why do 4 Indians not testify on this? Because that's too much for them. You know, they don't want to hear 4 Indian people talk because they will dismiss it. You know, first time I went down there, I had to spend 2 hours listening to them argue about Indian gaming at the legislature. My poor son is falling asleep on my shoulder because that's all they wanted to talk about at the legislature was Indians and gaming. And finally the little wild rice spoke comes up and I'm like, wake up, buddy. Come on, wake up, son. Come on. You know, I go up there and talk and, you know, I give my talk and the first thing they say to counter me is that it's a cultural and emotional issue for Indians. That's, you know, but, so this one guy, he's a young guy in the state legislature who's been supporting us, and his name's Frank Moe, and he wrote Monsanto a letter and said, you guys don't even do with wild rice. You know, you don't even have rice. Just, you know, why don't you just bud out? You know, you don't have an interest in this debate, so the Minnesota legislature would prefer that you would not enter it. You know, we're going to see how that goes. I'm working on it, but we're working on building a base that's a lot of Norwegians, you know, and guys with guns to support us. You know, because it is, and we'll see how it goes, you know. But, you know, this whole process politicized me. You know, a lot of you probably know me. I spent most of my life working on energy issues. You know, they're totally related. But, you know, in the process, you know, I became involved in the slow food movement, and a lot of you know about that movement. And Willem here, he had a nice event for us over at his, I don't know where he went, maybe someplace back there a little ago. You know, we had some people that are here went with us before to Italy, and some of them are going with us to Terra Madre here in a few weeks. And, you know, there we found, and Vandana taught me this a long time ago, because when we first started this battle, that's who I went to, Vandana Shiva. I said, because I knew she had the basmati rice campaign, and I said, what'd you do? What would you do, Vandana? And so she gave me a bunch of leads, helped me out. You know, of course it's a different set of tactics, because they're different communities, you know, but it's the same set of issues, you know. And so when I was over there, and I just want to say that, you know, when I was over there last time in 2004, you know, I was speaking, and at the end I gave one of the last speeches there, and I sat down, and this guy stood up, 2 people after me, and it was Prince Charles, right? And I don't know if you figured this out yet, but it turns out I'm actually not a big fan of the British colonialism, or, you know, I'm not a big fan of it. And I'm not actually a very big fan of British royalty either. You know, it's like, I don't know, that press prizes you. But anyway, so you know, and I'll say I had an attitude about Prince Charles, but I was like, you know, he's kind of stiff, you know, formal, stiff, stuffy. Anyway, and he gets up and you know what the guy says? He gives his talk, he's an organic farmer. He's like totally radical, the guy. You know, I didn't know that. You know, you sure would know that from the tabloids and from the rest of the stuff about him, whatever he talks about, you know. So he's this organic farmer, and he's given a speech, and he says that, you know, because of globalization and Monsanto and these corporations and, you know, biopiracy, and he says the next billion people going to be born in the world are going to be born in slums. They aren't even going to be born on the land, they're going to be born in slums. Next billion people. and can't feed themselves. Food's a basic human right. You know, he says, and who's going to take care of those chickens when they come home to roost? That's what that guy said. I was like, wow, he is radical. You know, then of course I realized that no one's going to take his job. He could say whatever he wants. You know, he's Prince Charles, you know. He's like in good shape, you know. But, you know, I realized that there's this whole movement that is doing these same struggles. 5,000 farmers and harvesters, and people just want the right to eat. You know, have seeds. And I know that Vandana will talk about that tomorrow. But anyway, you know, in closing, back at home in my own community, you know, we're in this battle on this issue. And I went out and I harvested rice this year. I took my son out to harvest with me. I made him pull me around. Last year I pulled his, 180-pound teenage boy body around. So I was afraid he was going to tip me over in the boat. I was like, God, I'm going to go down. Okay, I'll pull. Because you get one person stands and one person sits in the front and knocks, right? So the standing, I was a little worried about him in the boat, you know. So last year I pulled him. This year he pulled me. I was like, that's it, buddy. But you know, he was complaining on the way out there a little bit. I was like, what are you complaining about? I said, it's a beautiful day. You're out here on a lake. You know, you're with your mother. There's, you know, rice. It's the same rice that your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents harvested. You know, it smells good. And, you know, I said, you know, then he kind of, you know, he totally got it. After his little moment of teenage whininess. You know. But I bought rice, and I noticed that a lot of people who came to sell us rice for $1.25 up to $2 a pound we paid, which is what I have to make sure that Whole Foods pays, right? Well, I'm not selling to them unless I do. So I can't buckle. But you know what? I bought rice one day and spent the whole day out there getting itchy buying rice, and these guys pulled up. And me and this woman from the Smithsonian magazine was there, actually, and I made her come out and work with me. And so we were buying rice, and these guys pull up, and, you know, half those guys, their cars didn't work, you know, and we had to push a couple cars out, you know. That's how, I mean, these are not rich guys, you know. They use this to get their new car, and one guy parked his car way over here, and then he hauled his bags up. I was like, why'd you do that? He's like, oh, I was afraid I'd run out of gas, you know. And these other guys, these two young guys, they pull up, and they had a white Mustang convertible. I was like, that's a cool looking car, but no chicks in the back seat, rice. You know, 4 big bags of rice they harvested. I said, you guys. I said, okay, get the rice, sell the rice, then you go get the girls, right? I'm like, yeah, you know. But I took, you know, I visited these guys, and you know, most ricers on our reservation were under 30. You know, and I talked to some people from another, we'll say, unnamed Ojibwe reservation. And I said, how was your ricers? And they said, well, there was not that many. There was some, but a lot of them were elderly. I said, not many people that were young. I said, why is that? You know, 2 things I said, crack and too much money. So being poor has its benefits. Young people rice and do the right thing, you know. But that's what we're in for. You know, we're in for getting a fair price so these guys keep rising. You know, and they can make some money in their community, and that's how we're going to carry it on. But I talked to my tribe about this, and my tribe has the same complex issues that a lot of other tribes have, you know. I mean, how do you feed 25,000 people and you don't have enough, you know, houses? And your infrastructure is crumbling or whatever. And I work on this rice issue, and I talked to a tribe about it, and we're interested in doing the same thing you guys are doing down here, recovering our food economy. You know, we've got enough land to grow enough food for our reservation, and the other thing we're working on is recovering our energy economy. Or my tribe, but, you know, I talked to my tribe about global climate change and, you know, price of oil going up, world oil peaking. And some of my tribal council, they kind of, you know, they look at me like, you know, oh, I don't know, I suppose it was the that's that woman thing, I don't know. But you know what, I explained to my tribe, I said, I talked to, and other people have this, I'm sure. I talked to my tribal council and I said, you know what, you guys, figure this. Just talking about energy on my reservation, we did the math on it, crunched all these numbers, and we figured out in America, a fifth of our economy goes to energy. Energy is the biggest business in the world. A fifth of our economy, and we're addicts, right? A fifth of our economy is spent on energy. On my reservation, it's actually fourth. Why? Because we don't have any Priuses. No fuel-efficient vehicles. We're a northern Minnesota remote reservation. 35 miles for me to go to town, 38. Spend that much money on energy, and I said, we could talk about whatever you want to talk about, global climate change, and we need to take responsibility. I said, but you know what? It's the same thing between food and energy, is that right now, all our vendors are off reservation. So it turns out that we're spending a quarter of our economy on vendors like whoever. And we could keep that money here and build an economy and, know where our, energy comes from. In our case, wind. We have plenty of wind power potential. 8 megawatts our tribe needs. Export more. Same thing with food. That's how I explained it to our tribe. And then they got it. So it's like this, your political consciousness in the community is not always in the same place. But sometimes when I look at that bottom line, they could get that. I talked about our teachings, but in my reservation, not everybody's on the same page with the teachings. And in my council, 4 to 5 council people are serious Christians. Not necessarily with the same set of teachings. Not traditionals. But they understood that the right thing to do was to create a local food economy and create a local energy economy. So my tribe's working on that. It's going to take us a while to get it together, but we're on it. I'm trying to get my tribe to sign on to Kyoto. A bunch of other tribes have. Actually, I want to encourage tribes down here to do that. Come up with a renewable energy plan. But, in closing, that's kind of the story of our community, but I told you that I like to tell that story because, it shows that people could do it. Try a bunch of guys with more PhDs would make more of a mess of it. But in our communities, the more we draw on those things which are our teachings, the more we remember in that process, and this whole process of food sovereignty and energy sovereignty and all of that is related to those teachings. They are the philosophy and the implementation and the practice of it. That's what they are. They're not irrelevant things to be shelved to pull out when you need to have some kind of curriculum on Indian identity. They are indeed the essence of how you build a sustainable economy. And if you take them and use the wisdom to apply them, and that's what, in our community we're working on, but, I think it's this larger picture. In the end of how we all, as communities, recover that relationship. Miigwech, thank you.